Let's head to Nasrec, where the ANC continues with talks to review its policies. This weekend's engagements form part of preparations for the elective conference in December. It comes as the party faces the challenge of dealing with internal squabbles, while also having to address the sluggish economy as well as unemployment. Now, during his opening address at the conference, President Cyril Ramaphosa challenged party members to come up with solutions to address unemployment. For more on this, political analyst Matlala Setlhalogile joins us now for this conversation. Matlala, thank you so much for your time this morning. I mean, so much has been said in terms of how is it that we can truly move South Africa in a progressive manner by the African National Congress. And of course, some of these policies are speaking exactly to that. However, juxtapose it to what the leaders themselves have been saying about the type of comrades or the type of members that are within the ANC. Those policies will never materialize unless the members have got the political will to see this country forge ahead in actual progressiveness. And that speaks as well to the agenda of some of the members within the African National Congress.
Faith, morning. Look, Faith, I think the value system of the ANC collapsed a while back. The issue of the caliber of members has been an ongoing discussion within the ANC for quite some time. You would remember that during President Thabo Mbeki's tenure, he did indicate that fewer members but of good quality would actually assist the ANC in advancing its mission. Currently, in the ANC policy discussion documents, they do mention that they need to weed out elements of members who lack consciousness and members of members. Not necessarily in that way, but the whole conception of the idea is indicated in those policy documents. But I think leadership has to be shown from the top. You'd remember that President Ramaphosa, when he ascended in Nasrec in 2017, he campaigned on a reform and good governance trajectory. Something that currently from his side, he's not necessarily showing with refusal to account to party internal structures. I think his refusal to do that will set the tone amongst the kind of conduct that members within the ANC, within the party rather, carry themselves. And that quality of leadership will have to be shown by the leaders themselves.
Yeah, you know, as we're speaking here about how is it that we can recover as a country post-pandemic, dealing with the post-pandemic realities, so as it were, and having to actually build economic equity or economic justice. This has been an ongoing conversation even prior. Before COVID-19, I mean, issues of land have been conversations for donkey's end for the African National Congress. It's nothing new, but what is just, I think the struggling point here is that there's a whole gap when it comes to being able to implement the very same policies that they seem to be passionate about. We talk here about justice, for example. Justice is not a new conversation, but we see through our justice system how that justice is not being served to meet the benefits of all South Africans. We talk about economic emancipation while we're sitting with a youth unemployment rate of over 60%. So one wonders exactly, from the planning right down to the implementation, how long can we keep going on for with plans but not implementing and think that this country will not find itself in some kind of economic conundrum?
I think in terms of plans, there's this notion within the state to believe that plans in themselves are an achievement. They ignore the implementation aspect of those plans. And as you correctly mentioned, that some of these conversations are not necessarily new. They happened well before COVID. COVID, to an extent, has provided some sort of scapegoat to the governing party for their failure to implement some of their policies to actually realize economic resuscitation. And I think the ANC will require some innovative thinking, especially around issues of economic reconstruction and recovery. When you look at the economic reconstruction and recovery plan tabled by government in October 2020, in itself, it does not encompass any new and innovative thinking, for instance. The plan seeks to place manufacturing at the center of our economic recovery. And we know what has happened to our manufacturing sector, for instance. South Africa has experienced a premature deindustrialization for several factors. I think the opening up or liberalization of our economy, for instance, our network industries are not functioning as they should, for instance, and the skills issues that we've always said we've had a skills mismatch in South Africa, where we produce graduates but not necessarily those that are fit or to serve the economy. And the ANC has failed to address some of these things for over 2 decades. In as much as is a matter of implementation, I think the contextual setting is not static, it's dynamic. It requires new ways of looking at things and interpreting the current context much better.
Well, if there is no new way of looking at things in Matlala, does that mean that come 2024, the African National Congress risks becoming an opposition? Or actually, given where they are with this policy conference, as well as some of the tabling of, one may believe, what we want to hear, South Africans, we want to hear that the governing party actually has got forward or put forward policies that speaks to the betterment of this country. Could we see it actually make a little bit more progress? Or come 2024, South Africans sitting at a position where they say, actually, enough now, it's time for change?
I think, firstly, Faith, it has gone beyond we want to hear. It's a matter of we want to see tangible results. South Africans are tired of hearing plans. They want to see tangible results coming out of those policies and plans. And in terms of the ANC becoming or risk becoming an opposition, even before COVID, the ANC's electoral decline was too stark for everyone to see. And I do believe that the ANC risks becoming an opposition party come 2024. I do not see the ANC enhancing its capabilities to implement their policies between now and 2024. It will take some doing, and I do not think that the ANC has it within them.
You know, as you're speaking about whether or not the ANC has got it within them, it also does not help if those that are seen to be the leaders of the African National Congress seem to be pointing fingers at each other. I mean, we heard former President Thabo Mbeki making insights regarding how the African National Congress is at its weakest, and obviously on a public platform, or it was actually during Jesse Duarte, the late DSG's memorial service, speaking about how some of those plans by government have not necessarily come into fruition. And of course, being the governing party, they take responsibility for that one. Then you had the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa wanting to defend the very same stance of the work that's being done. So it's almost like a ping pong that is being played between those leaders that are supposed to show unity now more than ever if they truly want to show a solid force ahead of 2024.
The reality is the challenges within the ANC are nothing new. The ANC might be at its weakest currently, but the decline did not begin in 2017 in Nazareth. I mean, even in the 1994 political report that was given by the late President Mandela, he did indicate some of the challenges that we're dealing with currently, or at least the ANC is trying to address currently. So for about 28 years, the ANC has failed to deal with some of these challenges that they have noted a while back, even during President Thabo Mbeki's tenure as president. And with the issue of President Ramaphosa trying to respond to the remarks that were made by President Mbeki, there's an element of cult of personality, trying to personalize the organization itself. But the reality is the ANC believes in a concept of collective responsibility. And I think collectively, the previous leadership of ANC must take responsibility for the decline of the party, for the position it finds itself in currently.
I want us to talk a little bit about this notion of balance of forces, you know, which is also tabled as being one of the agenda points when it comes to this policy conference. Looking at balance of forces also looks at a generational mix. within the African National Congress in terms of leadership. It looks at the notion of women and the representation of women. And as we've seen from the PECs that have been held, we're not seeing an equitable distribution of balance of forces where women representation is actually concerned. Is that balance of forces actually truly achievable if the, where we are right now is anything to go by with the provincial elective conferences, but also looking back from even the time of Limpopo, Free State, with Mangaung, Nasrec, of course, and where we find ourselves now?
I think the balance of forces notion refers to the contextual setting within the ANC, within which the ANC exists, both domestic and international factors that shape that very environment. In terms of diversity amongst its leadership rank, the ANC still has got some time to go. If you have paid attention, the ANC provincial leadership across the different provinces are mostly made up of males, typically assigning the roles of the deputy provincial secretaries to women. It has been very typical of the ANC. It has not dismantled the patriarchal infrastructure within itself. And I think that is something that the ANC needs to look at. And in terms of the generational mix, I think the idea here is not necessarily achieving or bringing in young leaders for the sake of age. But what would matter more is to have this generational mix that will add to the diversity of ideas, diversity of thought, and diversity of thinking within the party itself, to bring an element of innovative thinking to solving the current complex challenges of society. I mean, we as a society, or South Africa as a society, is facing a number of wicked problems, and that requires some special type of thinking that the ANC currently seems not to have.
If we're taking a look at it, the very same stance, I mean, saying that society is facing, unfortunately, quite a dangerous point. I mean, to actually see some of the news that are making headlines of recent, it's either about, some kind of killing, mass killings. Right now, 7 people died yesterday outside a tuck shop. When we're looking at the 8 women that were raped in Krugersdorp, for example, and the subsequent over 80 people that have been arrested in that regard. If you're looking at the state of violence that has been perpetuated within our community, and yet the ANC sits down to discuss policies such as peace and stability, issues such as, being able to tackle justice in the judicial system in itself, is that able to materialize? We had a conversation with Police Minister Pegicele, my colleague, Matlala Setlhalogile, earlier on, speaking about just some of the realities being confronted on the ground by citizens of this country. I just wonder, peace and stability, how do we move it beyond just becoming a policy kind of note and actually translate to tangible change? Or is it too late, actually, at this point, Matlala?
I think the notion of peace and stability is quite multifaceted. It's not necessarily linked to police services or policing services within government. For a society to achieve peace and stability, several factors are at play: the socio-economic conditions within which society lives in. So crime in itself, the prevention thereof rather, is an effort or a multi-stakeholder effort to address. So firstly, we need to look at improving the conditions of South Africans in general, the socio-economic conditions, the human settlements that they reside in, their income levels, eradication of poverty, creating economic opportunities for these people. And on top of that, I think the ANC needs to tackle how to enhance the crime prevention strategy and look at the gaps and loopholes, and also beef up the capabilities of the South African Police Service, not only the visible policing that we see, but the crime intelligence within the SAPS, and also look at how to enhance state security. Because some of these things, especially when it comes to things that happen in communities, is in the purview of the domestic branch of state security. And those are some of the institutions within the public service that need to be augmented, their capabilities enhanced, in order to ensure that crime is dealt with. So the ANC needs to discuss interventions that are aimed at achieving that.
Yeah, as the ANC able to discuss those interventions when we're dealing with a situation where even our Minister of Home Affairs does not know how many illegal foreign nationals are actually in the country. That's been an admitted point, not knowing, admitting also around how our borders are actually very porous. That has been something that's been admitted on. Peace and stability and security cannot be attained until we are able to account for the citizens and the non-citizens of this country, those that are here legally, those that are here illegally. And I wonder if we can't appoint or account for that, it's easy for those that are unaccounted for in the South African context to start committing crimes, because where are you going to get their fingerprints from? They're not documented, right? And how do you track them down more than anything else? Security can't be achieved if just the counting of the citizens of a country has not been attained. And I wonder, how are we faring in that regard, given the actual admittance by the same Home Affairs Minister of some of the major gaps?
I think, firstly, Kate, the way you present it creates an impression that crime is a foreign national issue, which is not necessarily the case. Crime is crime. The issue here is not necessarily porous borders, but the inability of our state institutions to do what they're supposed to do. Look, the issue of porous borders is been ongoing for quite some time. A number of concerns have been raised about it, and it has been placed firmly on the policy agenda now, especially with the rise of social movements such as Operation Dudula, Put South African First. But I think that is scapegoating. The real challenges and causes of unemployment and socio-economic conditions and ultimately crime is not necessarily foreign nationals, but the inability to create an economic environment and to offer protection and policing services to citizens properly. Look, South Africa is not the only country with migrants, but other countries who have a similar challenge of migrants, they have relatively stable countries with safety offered in their communities. So I think deflecting by trying to lay down, or rather lay the issue of crime on the doorstep of foreign nationals is indigenous.
Yeah, not on the doorstep of foreign nationals, but if the country cannot account for how many illegal citizens are in the country, being in a country illegally is a crime in itself. I'm sure we can all agree on that. And if we can't account as the governing party, if the government themselves can't account, surely from an intelligent perspective, from a security perspective, that in itself is something that we need to look at significantly. Nothing to do with the economic participation, but by being in the country illegally, that itself is a crime.
True, that is a crime. Being in any country for that matter, without following the right processes. But with that said, I still reiterate that we cannot reduce our crime situation and lack of safety within our communities to that just one aspect. And indeed, the government needs to do better in ensuring that the South African borders are tightened, and tightened not necessarily from a xenophobic point of view, but from a policy enforcement and implementation point of view.
Then when we're looking at the outcomes of this policy conference, do we see something that is going to be, that we can hang on to as citizens of this country in respect of saying, you know what, the governing party actually has got this mandate that it's going to be focusing on for the next coming, let's say, 2 years or so, till 2024, and we can hang on to that as citizens to say, this is the strategy going forward. We can be comfortable in that strategy going forward, that indeed there is a plan of action that they're working with. Is there something out of this policy conference that as citizens of this country can actually hang on to?
Faith, I think the elective conference will provide clear policy positions. Remember that ultimately policies are adopted at the National Elective Conference through resolutions of that specific conference. Here is just to set the tone of the policy trajectory that the party intends to follow over the next few years. Whether something will come out from this very conference that South Africans can hold on to depends on the substance and the quality of engagements within the different commissions at the conference. And so far, it doesn't promise to live up to that. And I do believe that, as I had earlier indicated, the quality of ideas within the ANC is disappointing.
At this point, then, Matlala, what's the solution before I let you go?
It's quite simple. I think South Africans have to imagine the future without the ANC. This thing of blurring party and state lines is not only the problem within the party itself, but within the general society. We have to de-link the state from the ANC. Over the years, it has become, or rather the ANC has become synonymous with the state, which I think is something that prevents South Africans from looking for better political solutions and better political options, because as things stand, I don't think that the ANC will be able to reform and deliver on its mandate as many South Africans hope for.
Yeah, no, very sobering points that you're making this morning there. Thank you very much for that. Political analyst Matlala Setlhalogile there giving us his take in terms of how this policy conference is actually unfolding.